So if you look at a standard medical textbook, biology usually makes, perfect geographical sense. You twist an ankle, the swelling happens right there at the ankle.
Right, exactly. Cause and effect.
Yeah, you get a chest infection, you cough, it's happening right there in the exact same neighborhood. But what if I told you that a tiny butterfly-shaped gland in your neck is intimately tied to this intensely itchy, scarring skin condition miles away down in the anogenital area?
I mean, it sounds completely bizarre on the surface.
It really does. But today, we are looking at a huge stack of data for you. We've got medical guidelines, recent meta-analyses like the massive 2026 WU study, and various clinical blogs. And the core mission of this deep dive is to answer one highly specific question.
And it's a fascinating one.
It is. The question on the table is, can a thyroid problem trigger lichen sclerosus?
Well, we naturally want biology to act like simple engineering, right? Where localized problems have localized causes. But when you introduce the human immune system into the equation, that geographical map is just completely redrawn.
So what's the verdict? Does it trigger it?
The short answer to whether the thyroid directly pulls the trigger is, well, no.
Okay.
But the longer answer is this incredible story of how our immune system can sometimes basically hunt in packs.
I love that phrasing.
Yeah.
But before we can even understand if one causes the other or how they're connected, let's unpack this. We need to establish what these two contenders actually are.
Definitely. Especially lichen sclerosus, or LS.
Right, because a lot of people listening might have never heard of it. Or, they might be dealing with it right now and feeling completely isolated by the diagnosis.
And that isolation is incredibly common. LS is frequently misdiagnosed or brushed off as a simple yeast infection or just, under-discussed because of where it primarily occurs.
Yeah. So stripping away the heavy medical jargon from the guidelines we reviewed, LS is essentially a chronic inflammatory skin condition. It causes these parchment-like ivory white patches to form, mostly in the anogenital region, and it leads to intense, sometimes really debilitating itching.
And it's not just the itch. Over time, if it's left unchecked, it can actually cause the tissues to fuse together.
Oh, wow. Fuse together?
Yeah, or scar, sometimes forming this characteristic figure 8 pattern of white skin around the vulva and the perianal area.
And it mostly affects women, right?
Overwhelmingly, yes. And the demographic data shows two very distinct peaks for when it first shows up, in prepubertal girls and then again in postmenopausal women.
Interesting. So those age brackets must be a huge clue.
Exactly. It's a massive clue to what is actually driving the disease, which we will definitely get to.
Okay, so we have this localized skin condition on one hand, and on the other, we have the thyroid, this little gland in your neck that pumps out hormones to control your entire metabolism, your energy, your body temperature.
Right.
So looking at the sources we've gathered, I have to ask you point blank, do any of these medical guidelines say that a faulty thyroid-like Hashimoto's or Graves' disease actually acts as the catalyst for this skin condition?
They do not. A thyroid problem does not directly create lichen sclerosus. I mean, if your thyroid starts underproducing hormones, that systemic drop doesn't magically travel down and create white plaques on the skin.
That makes sense.
However, and this is a massive however in the literature, the research shows that up to 30% of women with LS also have an autoimmune thyroid disease.
30%? That's huge.
It is. So they aren't causing each other. Rather, they share a much deeper underlying root cause.
Which is what?
Systemic immune dysregulation.
One of the clinical blogs we read framed this perfectly. Think of it like seeing the exact same two people at every single party you go to.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Right. Person A didn't invite person B. They might not even be talking to each other across the room. But they clearly run in the exact same social circles.
Yes. And in this case, that social circle is an overactive, confused immune system.
Exactly.
They are responding to the same underlying systemic environment. The environment itself is what invites them both to the party.
So if they were at the same party, the immediate question is, how often are they actually bumping into each other? And looking at this stack of research, we have this real tale of massive population numbers contradicting some of the smaller clinical studies.
Right. The data can seem a bit tangled at first.
Yeah, because the numbers from the 2026 systematic review and meta-analysis by Wu and colleagues, they're actually kind of shocking.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the population data in that Wu study. That's what makes it impossible to ignore. They pulled data from multiple countries, the US, Sweden, Finland, Poland, and they looked at over 177,000 lichen sclerosus patients.
Wow.
And then they compared them to over 22 million healthy controls.
22 million controls.
Yeah.
You simply don't get a clearer bird's-eye view of human health than a data set of that size.
You really don't. And what they found were highly significant statistical associations. Patients with LS had nearly 2.5 times the odds of having general thyroid diseases.
Okay, 2.5 times.
Yeah, but when you narrow the focus down to autoimmune thyroid disease specifically, where the immune system is actively attacking the thyroid gland, the odds jump to over 4 times higher.
4 times the odds. That is a massive red flag waving in the immune system. But wait, I have to push back on this seemingly perfect conclusion.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I'm looking at another paper in our stack. This is a 2025 Polish study by Zia Babalik, and they looked at 50 women with vulvar LS.
Right, I remember that one.
And there is also a pediatric study in the stack looking at 55 girls with LS. Both of these smaller studies found absolutely no statistically significant link in antithyroid antibodies between their LS patients and the healthy controls.
Yep, they found nothing.
They literally concluded that their study did not confirm the association. So how do we square that? How can 177,000 people reveal a 4-fold risk while these clinic studies find nothing at all?
That tension between macro population trends and microclinical samples is it's a classic problem in medical research.
Right.
Oh, yeah. When you look at 22 million people, you can spot a trend that is absolutely real across a lifespan. But if you only pull 50 people into a room, that sample might just, by pure chance, not include the specific subgroup that drives that larger statistical overlap.
Okay, so the sample size issue.
Partially. But beyond just the math, there's a crucial timeline factor mentioned in the sources that explains this contradiction beautifully.
The timeline. Are we talking about how long it takes for a disease to physically show up?
Exactly. We're talking about when symptoms manifest on the outside versus when the microscopic markers of disease actually reach a detectable threshold on the inside.
Oh, I see.
The localized skin changes in lichen sclerosus manifest much earlier because the tissue damage is happening right on the surface.
Yeah.
You feel the intense itch. You can physically see the white patches forming.
Right, it's obvious to the patient.
Yes. But the systemic immune response against the thyroid, that is a slow, hidden burn.
Because it's happening internally on a cellular level.
Right. Exactly. Your body is slowly developing weapons against the thyroid, specifically these things called anti-TPO or anti-thyroglobulin antibodies.
Okay, and what do those do?
They're basically custom-built proteins designed to attack the thyroid's hormone factories. But your body doesn't just build a million of them overnight.
It takes time.
Right. That process might take years, sometimes decades, to build up to a concentration level where it finally triggers a positive result on a routine blood test.
Oh, wow, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So in that pediatric study of the 55 girls, they might just be too young.
Precisely.
The thyroid antibodies simply haven't had the 10 or 15 years required to build up an army large enough to trigger that blood test yet.
The timeline is everything here. A 10-year-old girl might show severe skin symptoms today, which is why she's in the dermatologist's office getting diagnosed with LS. But as the pediatric researchers themselves noted, the thyroid autoimmunity might take much longer to mature into a detectable disease. You can't just take a snapshot of 50 patients at one single moment in their youth and assume you have a whole picture.
Right, of what their immune system will do over their entire lifetime.
Exactly.
So here's where it gets really interesting. Since we know from the macro data that these two conditions frequently co-occur over a lifetime, why does the immune system target these two completely specific, seemingly unrelated areas?
Like, why the vulva and the thyroid?
Exactly. Why those two?
Well, to understand that, we have to dive into the biology of how the immune system makes mistakes in the first place. Both of these conditions feature abnormal T lymphocyte activity.
T cells, the frontline soldiers of the immune system.
Right. In a healthy body, they patrol the bloodstream, looking for foreign invaders like viruses or bacteria, and they attack them.
But in an autoimmune condition, they turn on the host.
Yes. In LS, we see these autoreactive T cells attacking basement membrane proteins in the skin. Specifically, the guidelines point out that 60 to 80% of women with vulval LS have autoantibodies to something called extracellular matrix protein 1, or ECM1.
Wait, let's break that down. Basement membrane. Were we talking about the structural foundation of the skin cells?
Think of the basement membrane as the vital layer of mortar that holds the top layer of your skin firmly attached to the deeper layer.
Okay, mortar. Got it. And what is ECM1 doing before it gets attacked?
ECM1 is a crucial protein within that mortar. It provides structural integrity and regulates collagen.
So it's keeping everything strong.
Right. So when those rogue T-cell soldiers start attacking the ECM1, the skin loses its structural scaffolding. It thins out, it loses its elasticity, and the body tries to repair the damage by laying down dense white scar tissue.
And that is the physical mechanism behind the parchment-like patches and the fusing.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, in autoimmune thyroid disease, you have very similar rogue T-cell activity. But instead of attacking the skin's mortar, it's targeting thyroid tissue, like the thyroid peroxidase enzymes.
Right.
Now, the sources mention this phrase, molecular mimicry, as the reason this happens. I understand the general concept, like a case of biological identity theft.
That's a good way to put it.
But how does a microscopic T-cell actually get confused between a foreign bacteria and human skin tissue?
Well, it's less like facial recognition software and more like a physical lock and key mechanism. A T-cell doesn't have eyes. It navigates by feeling the three-dimensional shape of molecules.
Okay, so it's doing it by touch, basically.
Yeah. Let's say you get a bacterial infection. The immune system wakes up, sends out those T-cell soldiers, and says, attack anything that has this specific, jagged, three-dimensional shape.
So the T-cells are aggressively hunting for that exact physical key.
Yes. They hunt down the bacteria and clear the infection. But your skin's ECM1 protein, or your thyroid tissue, just happens to have a microscopic section that mimics that exact same jagged 3D shape.
By pure coincidence?
By pure evolutionary coincidence. The T cell bumps into your healthy skin, or your healthy thyroid, feels that jagged edge, and assumes the infection is still there.
The lock fits the key.
Exactly. It sends out the alarm, and the friendly fire begins.
That is both terrifying and fascinating. But what makes someone susceptible to that specific structural mix-up? Like, why doesn't it happen to everyone?
Genetics. The research highlights a strong genetic overlap between these two conditions. We all have genetic markers called HLA types, human leukocyte antigens.
Okay.
Think of them as the barcode system your cells use to announce to the immune system, hey, I belong here, don't shoot.
But some barcodes are easier for the immune system to misread.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specific HLA barcodes, particularly HLA DQ7 and DR3, have been found to heavily predispose people to both lichen sclerosus and autoimmune thyroid disease.
Oh, I see.
If you inherit those specific barcodes, your immune system is just genetically more likely to make that specific 3D lock and key mistake when it's provoked by an environmental trigger.
Okay, we have to address a massive demographic elephant in the room regarding this data.
The gender gap.
Yes. The gender gap is incredibly striking. I'm looking at a study by Kreuter and colleagues from 2013. They found that 15.2% of women with LS had an autoimmune thyroid disease. But when they looked at men with LS, it was only 3.8%.
Right. It's a huge difference.
Why is this autoimmune clustering, this pack-hunting behavior, so overwhelmingly a female phenomenon? Does LS in men even work the same way?
That is one of the most critical distinctions in the clinical literature. Male LS absolutely exists, but the data strongly suggests it often has a completely different primary driver.
Really? Like what?
In men, the condition is heavily linked to uncircumcised anatomy, chronic moisture, and physical irritation from urine microdroplets getting trapped against the skin over years.
So for men, it's driven more by local chronic physical inflammation.
Broadly speaking, yes. It's often tied to something called the Koebner phenomenon. That's where repetitive physical trauma to the skin triggers a localized disease response.
Okay, so it's less about the systemic immune system for that.
Right. The systemic autoimmune clustering we see with the thyroid is overwhelmingly a female phenomenon in LS, and that ties directly back to hormones.
Ah, because of those two demographic peaks we mentioned earlier, pre-puberty and post-menopause?
Exactly.
How exactly do hormones trigger this?
Well, estrogen is a powerful immune amplifier. In a healthy scenario, estrogen naturally enhances the immune response, which is actually why women generally fight off infections better than men.
Okay.
But estrogen interacts directly with T cells. During massive hormonal milestones, like the wild fluctuations before puberty, during pregnancy, or that steep drop during menopause, that immune amplification gets incredibly erratic.
So the immune system goes from being vigilant to being hypervigilant and chaotic.
Yes. Those massive hormonal shifts act as the environmental stressor. They create a chaotic environment for immune regulation, which finally tips a genetically predisposed immune system into active autoimmunity.
And the T cells get confused, the lock and key mistake happens, and the attack begins.
You've got it.
So what does this all mean? We've gone deep into the biology, the rogue T cells, the molecular mimicry, the massive statistical overlaps. But if you are listening to this right now and you or someone you love is navigating an LS diagnosis, what is the practical utility of all this data?
That's the most important question.
Because reading phrases like autoimmune clustering and 4 times the odds of thyroid disease can induce a massive amount of health anxiety.
And that anxiety is a very real heavy burden for patients to carry. But the goal of understanding this overlap isn't to create a sense of impending doom. It's to give you a roadmap for your own biology.
Yeah, the Lichen Sclerosus Support Network, which is one of the patient advocacy sources in our stack, they had a brilliant quote regarding that.
What did they say?
They wrote, "Awareness allows for early detection. Fear does not add protection."
Wow. That is perfect.
Right. It turns this stack of scary medical statistics into a literal playbook. It tells you exactly what to look for before you even feel sick.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound shift in perspective. It moves the power dynamic back to the patient. Knowing this overlap exists gives you the precise vocabulary to ask the right questions at the doctor's office, rather than waiting for the system to catch up to your symptoms.
So based on these medical guidelines, what are the clinical, practical takeaways for someone looking to use that playbook today?
Well, if you have a confirmed diagnosis of LS, the standard recommendation is to advocate for baseline systemic screening.
What does that involve?
You don't need to panic, but at your next physical, you should explicitly ask your doctor for a TSH. That's a thyroid stimulating hormone test. You also want a complete blood count, or CBC, and a basic metabolic panel.
Just to get a baseline measurement of how the internal engine is currently running, so you have something to compare it to later.
Exactly. But furthermore, you need to monitor your own body for subtle systemic symptoms. We talked about how the thyroid controls metabolism.
Right.
So, are you experiencing crushing, unexplained fatigue that doesn't resolve with sleep? Sudden weight gain or loss that doesn't make sense?
Hair thinning, maybe?
Yes, hair thinning or sudden intolerance to cold.
And if a patient with LS starts noticing those things?
You need to go back to your doctor and explicitly ask them to check for Hashimoto's antibodies, specifically those TPO and thyroglobulin antibodies we discussed earlier.
Because of the timeline factor.
Right. Remember the timeline. Your skin symptoms might have been the early surface warning sign for a deeper thyroid issue that is only just now, years later, reaching a critical mass where it affects your metabolism.
Connecting those dots for your doctor, who might only be focused on the localized skin issue, can expedite your treatment by years.
It absolutely can.
Now, we can't talk about these clinical guidelines without addressing the elephant in the room regarding the skin itself, which is the cancer risk.
Yeah, we have to talk about that.
The data mentions a 2 to 6% lifetime risk of vulvar squamous cell carcinoma associated with lichen sclerosus. That is a terrifying statistic for any patient to read on a medical printout.
It is deeply unsettling. But context is absolutely vital here. That 2 to 6% risk is heavily, almost exclusively, associated with inadequately treated lichen sclerosus.
The operative word being inadequately. How does the treatment change the cancer math?
Well, cancer fundamentally is a disease of cellular DNA copy errors. When you have chronic, unchecked inflammation from LS, your skin cells are constantly dying and rapidly turning over to try and heal the damage.
Just constantly trying to rebuild.
Right. And that rapid, chaotic cell division over years and decades drastically increases the mathematical chance of a DNA mutation occurring, leading to squamous cell carcinoma.
So the goal is to stop the chaotic cell turnover.
Yes. And the data shows that consistent long-term use of ultra-potent topical corticosteroids, which is the current gold standard treatment for LS, does exactly that.
Really?
Yeah, it halts the rogue T cells, it stops the chronic inflammation at the surface.
So the steroid ointment isn't just a band-aid for the itching. It is actively protecting your cellular DNA from mutating.
It is preventative medicine in the truest sense. Studies show that patients who adhere to their maintenance steroid treatment, even when they aren't actively itching, bring their risk of vulvar cancer almost entirely back down to the baseline population level.
That is incredibly reassuring.
It is. The risk is managed through consistency and regular monitoring by a specialist who understands the disease.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, we set out today to discover if a thyroid problem triggers lichen sclerosus. And the answer is a resounding no. The thyroid doesn't pull the trigger.
It doesn't.
But they are undeniably cut from the exact same immunological cloth, especially in women. They share genetic barcodes, they involve the same rogue T-cell soldiers making the same 3D lock and key mistakes, and they run in the same autoimmune circles.
And knowing that they run in the same circles transforms a lichen sclerosus diagnosis from a purely localized burden into a powerful tool for holistic health monitoring. It allows you to watch the horizon and understand the interconnected nature of your own biology.
It gives you the playbook before the game even fully starts.
Exactly.
But before we sign off, the timeline aspect of this data, the idea that the skin shows the damage years before the blood test catches the thyroid antibodies,
Yeah.
it brings up a fascinating way to view the human body.
It really raises an incredible question for all of us to consider. We tend to view the skin as just the inert wrapper for the body, the packaging.
Right.
But if a localized skin condition on the vulva can serve as an early warning dashboard light for a systemic thyroid issue years or even decades before it shows up in a routine internal blood test,
Yeah.
what other subtle structural signals is the skin giving us right now that we just haven't yet learned to decode? Could the skin truly be the ultimate visible window into the invisible internal immune network?
Wow. The skin isn't just the wrapper, it's the dashboard warning light. That is definitely something to mull over the next time you notice a seemingly random change in your own body. Thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep advocating for yourself, and keep asking great questions.